In the black between galaxies, where even the light of dying stars refused to travel, a shape drifted, vast, wounded, and silent. The Titan awoke. His breath fogged the void, his heart a rhythm older than suns. His armor, cracked and dim, shimmered faintly with the residue of 6 impossible stones. The gauntlet, that cursed relic of balance, pulsed weakly upon his left hand. Each stone flickered like a dying ember, the Mind Stone trembling as if in fear. The Reality Stone bleeding motes of light into the abyss. Thanos raised his head. Around him the universe was wrong. The tapestry of creation felt thicker, denser, alive with whispers. His senses, forged by millennia of war and silence, reached outward and recoiled. The stars hummed with voices that were not stars. The fabric of reality shuddered beneath an unseen tide. It was not the void he knew, not the clean silence of death. This place breathed corruption. He stood slowly, boots scraping across the fractured hull of a derelict Imperial cruiser, though he did not yet know its name. The air tasted of rust and incense, of burnt prayers and fear. 1,000 sigils marked the broken walls, wings, skulls, and the symbol of a double-headed eagle faded and scorched. He had seen many empires die, yet none clung to faith so violently. The gauntlet trembled. The power stone surged, then dimmed, as though drowning in unseen waters. A voice, not a sound but a thought that slithered through his skull, murmured his name in 100 tongues. Thanos, Titan, God, intruder. The warp was watching. He turned his gaze upward. The sky was not black but bleeding, a storm of colorless flame and shadow where faces formed and vanished. He knew instinctively that this was not space as he understood it, but something older, something sentient. Here, will-shaped existence. Madness had form, and thought had weight. He whispered to the gauntlet, "Where have you brought me?" The soul stone responded first, pulsing faintly. For a heartbeat he saw flashes, a universe torn open, time collapsing upon itself, and a great psychic wound that bled eternity. This place was not another dimension. It was the wound between all things, and the wound was alive. Thanos clenched his fist. The stones, though diminished, obeyed. Reality bent faintly like a trembling mirror, but the reflection twisted into mockery. His own face grinned back at him, warped by unseen hands. Behind it, shadows laughed. Power here was not absolute. The rules were rewritten by madness. He stepped forward, each movement echoing like thunder in the dead void. Debris drifted past him, fragments of ships, corpses frozen in silent prayer, drifting toward a crimson horizon. He could feel their minds, even in death, screaming through the warp's echo. Each one was a note in a chorus of eternal torment. It stirred something even in him, not pity but fascination. The Titan had seen universes die. He had ended half of all life with a gesture, but this was beyond death. This was existence sustained by agony. He looked at the gauntlet again and muttered, "Perhaps this is where gods come to rot." He extended his hand, seeking to open a portal home. The space stone flickered, but the air before him convulsed like liquid glass. The portal failed. The portal failed. The stones were sick, infected by the psychic filth of this reality. He could feel it seeping into him, whispering promises of dominion and despair. For the first time in centuries, Thanos felt something unfamiliar, uncertainty. He turned as light rippled behind him. From the red fog emerged figures, human perhaps, though twisted by war. Their armor was carved with holy symbols, their eyes sunken from exhaustion. They spoke a language he did not know, but the tone was clear, warning. Weapons rose, crude by his standards, yet burning with faith. Bolters clicked into readiness. Thanos did not raise his hand, he merely watched. A sister of battle stepped forward, her voice trembling with fury. "By the God Emperor's will, you are an abomination." He regarded her, then the world around her. Crumbling cathedrals, burning relics, skies filled with silent screams. "Your God presides over a dying empire," he said softly, his voice resonant as thunder beneath the ocean. "And yet you call me abomination." She fired. A storm of explosive shells erupted. The Titan did not flinch. Each round dissolved midair, absorbed by invisible power. He lifted his hand slowly, not in anger, but in demonstration, the infinity gauntlet glowing faintly once more. The air shimmered. The soldiers froze in place, suspended between instants of time. He walked among them, studying their still faces. Their faith burned so brightly it nearly blinded him. "They're so fragile," he murmured, "yet so defiant." He turned his gaze to the bleeding sky. This universe is sick, diseased by chaos. Perhaps it too requires balance. The stones pulsed in agreement, or resistance. He could no longer tell. Then, as if the universe itself answered, the sky split. The sky split. From the tear-poured whispers, not sound but thoughts, ancient, mocking, infinite, the warp had seen him. It understood his purpose, and it began to laugh. The sound was everywhere, inside him, through him. The gauntlet flared white-hot. Pain searched through his arm, deeper than flesh, into the soul. The stone screamed. The air rippled with impossible color as the warp reached for him like a living hand. Thanos fell to one knee, the weight of unreality pressing down like gravity made of sorrow. The laughter grew. Around him, the frozen soldiers began to weep blood, though time still held them. The warp was testing him, peeling his mind open. He roared against it, forcing his will outward, and the storm recoiled. His fist closed. The gauntlet dimmed, its hunger momentarily sated. The voices faded to whispers once more. He stood burned but unbroken. The Titan stared into the crimson void, his face unreadable. "So be it," he said quietly. "If the warp is a god, then I shall erase it." Far above, something shifted, as if the galaxy itself had heard his vow, The laughter ceased. Only silence remained. But in that silence, something watched him still, and far beyond sight, 4 powers stirred, their attention drawn to a single intruder who dared to dream of balance in a universe built on madness. The warp unfolded like a wound that would not close. From the bleeding horizon above Caldrus Romus, a tear widened, its edges crawling with light that had never belonged to any star. Thanos stood unmoving, gaze fixed upon the rupture that had answered his vow. The world beneath his feet trembled as the sky inverted. Mountains bent like molten wax, and oceans turned to mirror the crimson void. His will, so absolute in the cosmos he once ruled, found itself dissolving in this storm of thoughts made flesh. He did not resist when the pull came. The air thickened, pressing against his body like liquid iron, drawing him upward into the rift. The frozen soldiers remained statues below, their suspended tears reflecting the burning light as the Titan vanished into the maw of the warp. Silence shattered. The warp screamed. He fell without falling, his body twisting through impossible directions, passing through layers of memory and nightmare. The gauntlet burned brighter than a sun, its stones spinning in revolt. Visions cascaded through his mind, not illusions but truths rendered raw. He saw empires collapsing, gods devouring their followers, mortals clawing at stars that refused to answer. He saw his own reflection multiplied infinitely, each one corrupted by a different hunger, domination, despair, godhood. And then came the whisper. They were not words, but the essence of them. Thoughts woven into the marrow of his being. They spoke in 1,000 tones, some pleading, others mocking, all unending. The warp was not chaos alone. It was consciousness unbound, the accumulated dreams, fears, and sins of every sentient soul. To exist here was to drown in the psychic ocean of the dead and living alike. He walked through it, though no ground existed. Fragments of worlds drifted by, broken cathedrals, floating citadels, fields of corpses frozen mid-prayer. He reached out and touched one fragment, and the stone beneath his hand wept blood. "A universe built upon agony," he murmured. "How fitting." Something moved in the void. A ripple of form, vast and shadowed. He turned slowly as the first of them appeared. A giant of brass and blood, wreathed in fire that burned with hatred alone. A voice like the roar of a dying sun echoed across eternity. "You smell of will, creature, of conquest." The presence loomed closer, each step collapsing realities beneath it. "Do you think yourself worthy to shape the warp?" Khorne, the blood god, the lord of war. Thanos recognized the aura instinctively, not as divinity but as the pure abstraction of slaughter. He did not bow. "I seek not to shape," he said, voice steady despite the heat that blistered his armor. "I seek to erase." The void quaked with laughter. Rivers of blood formed from nothing, cascading through the endless dark. "Erase, fool. The warp is every slaughtered heart, every drop spilled in devotion to me. You would need to kill all life to silence my name." Thanos' gaze hardened. "Then perhaps that is what must be done." The laughter ceased, cut short by something colder, curiosity. Khorne's burning visage leaned close until the Titan could see his reflection within those molten eyes. "You are not of this realm," the god rumbled. "Yet you carry a power that reeks of absolution. Be gone before I make of you a skull for my throne." Thanos raised the gauntlet, its stones flaring. The crimson of the Power Stone met the endless red of Khorne's domain, and for a moment the warp itself dimmed. Khorne's image fractured, dispersing into vapor and ash. The Titan stood alone once more, his arm trembling from the strain. Power here was not clean. It fed upon the will that wielded it. But before he could regain his breath, the light shifted again. The air rippled into color and smoke. From the haze emerged another figure, ever-changing, impossible to focus upon. 1,000 eyes blinked across its form, each seeing a different version of reality. A serpentine voice slithered around him, bold, decisive, yet blind to consequence. How delightful! Thanos turned, face expressionless. And you are? 'Tisn't, the voice replied, though it came from everywhere and nowhere. The architect of fate, the whisper in every choice, the end of every certainty. A shape coalesced, feathers of sapphire flame and tendrils of shifting energy. You would erase the warp, but the warp is thought, it is ambition. It is the wish for change. Would you erase yourself as well? I am balance, Thanos said, the words cutting through the air like iron. I bring order to chaos. The laughter that answered him was not madness but amusement, ancient, patient, cruel. Order is but another mask of entropy, Titan. Even your balance is a form of corruption. The warp darkened around him. Faces of forgotten souls screamed from the walls of unreality, dissolving into the blue light. The gauntlet shone brighter, its gems flickering as if arguing among themselves. The Mind Stone pulsed in distress, resisting something unseen. Tzentu drifted closer, a tide of feathers and eyes. You cannot snap away thought, any more than you can silence a dream. But perhaps you might change it. Join me, Thanos. Become the equilibrium you crave. Together we could write a new law into this universe, one that even the gods would obey. Thanos said nothing for a long moment. His gaze moved beyond the entity to the endless storms twisting through eternity. There was beauty here, buried beneath the madness. A reflection of all creation's struggle, unending, futile, yet somehow divine. He clenched his fist. Oh, I will not join corruption to cure it. The warp flared. A Senchi's laughter turned shrill, shattering into fragments of sound. The vision collapsed around him, light consumed form. The Titan fell once more, plunging through colors beyond comprehension, through memories not his own. When he landed, it was upon solid ground, though it bled beneath his boots. A field of skulls stretched to infinity, rivers of molten iron carving paths between mounds of bone. Above him, the warp swirled like a wounded eye. The gauntlet hissed and cooled, the stones finally silent. Thanos exhaled, steady but weary. If this realm feeds on will, he murmured, then I will starve it. A whisper brushed his ear, gentle this time, almost kind. We shall see, Titan. The warp remembers all who defy it, and as he began to walk toward the horizon of blood and storm, the laughter returned, softer now, distant, as if the very gods watched with a predator's patience, waiting to see whether the intruder would crumble or ascend. The field of skulls dissolved beneath his steps, bleeding into dust that scattered into a sky of ember and ash. Thanos walked onward, each motion steady, each breath a quiet defiance against the madness pressing in from all sides. The warp's crimson glow dimmed, folding away like a retreating tide, and through its haze emerged a world, real, fractured, and dying. The Titan crossed the threshold without resistance. The fabric of reality solidified around him, heavy and slow, and the air became thick with the scent of burning incense and iron. Caldra's wraith awaited him again, though not as he had left it. The tear in the sky had closed, leaving behind a halo of warped light that hung motionless above the ruins. The city below was no longer a battlefield but a grave. Blackened statues of saints loomed over shattered cathedrals. Rivers of molten glass flowed where streets once stood. The banners of the ecclesiarchy fluttered weakly, scorched and torn, each bearing the sigil of the god emperor whose name had been whispered by the dying. Thanos moved through the devastation, his every step echoing among the ruins like the toll of a bell. He could feel the residue of the warp lingering in the air, a sickness without cure. The gauntlet dimmed with every pulse, its stones flickering in exhaustion. Each gem's color had faded to a dull ember, their voices silent at last. The Titans sensed that even their cosmic purpose had begun to fracture under the weight of this realm's unholy physics. The sound of prayer reached him. Weak, trembling, human, he turned toward it, stepping through the remains of a grand cathedral. Inside, amid the broken pews and spilled relics, a lone priest knelt before a cracked altar. His robes were torn, his hands bloody, his lips moving in whispered devotion to a god who had long since stopped answering. Thanos watched in silence until the priest's prayer faltered. The man's eyes lifted, fear flickered, then awe. "You are no demon," the priest breathed. "No," Thanos replied, his voice low, steady, ancient. "I am truth made flesh. I am purpose." The priest's hands shook as he rose. "Then a saint? A saint?" The Titan's gaze drifted to the shattered icon above the altar, a depiction of the Emperor, one hand raised in benediction, the other grasping a sword. The face was gone, obliterated by fire. "If I were a saint," Thanos said, "your God would still hear you." The priest's faith wavered, visible in the trembling of his lips. "The Emperor hears all who serve," he insisted, as if the act of speaking might make it true, even in silence. His light— "Your light is dying," Thanos interrupted, voice cutting through the incense-thick air. "You fight wars for salvation while drowning in your own blood. You worship a corpse upon a throne." The priest recoiled as though struck. A blasphemy. A truth. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the faint crackle of burning oil. The Titan turned away, his gaze settling on a mural half destroyed by flame. It depicted humanity triumphant, armored legions, radiant angels, the Emperor's golden visage. Yet beneath the charred paint, the faces blurred, twisted, merged with screams that had been brushed into the art as if by accident. He traced the lines with one massive finger. "Even your faith bears the mark of madness." The gauntlet sparked suddenly, a flare of light bursting from the soul stone. Ha! Thanos stiffened as images flooded his mind. The cries of millions, their souls devoured by demons, their prayers turned to ash. He saw entire hives collapsing under psychic storms, worlds consumed by their own belief. The warp fed upon it all, drawing strength from hope as much as despair. Balance was an illusion here. Every act of devotion only deepened the rot. The priest fell to his knees. "If you are not demon nor saint, what are you?" Thanos looked down at him, eyes like dying stars. "I am inevitable." A tremor shook the cathedral. Dust fell from the rafters, and the ground split, spilling black fire. Through it rose shapes, demons crawling through the cracks like maggots through an open wound. Their bodies were mockeries of flesh, mouths where eyes should be, tongues of steel and ash. They howled as one, and the air curdled with their hunger. Thanos turned calmly, raising the gauntlet. The stones glimmered weakly, yet they responded. A single gesture tore the nearest demon apart, its form unraveling into strands of red mist. Another surged forward, claws wreathed in flame. The Titan met it with his fist, and the creature exploded into silence. But for each that fell, two more emerged. The priest screamed, clutching his holy symbol. "Emperor, protect!" The prayer died with him. A demon's talon pierced his chest, lifting him from the ground. Thanos moved faster than thought. His hand closed around the creature's neck, crushing it. The priest's lifeless body slipped free, collapsing at the Titan's feet. Thanos stared at the corpse for a long moment. The man's blood spread across the floor, forming the outline of a broken halo. He had prayed until his last breath, and his God had not answered. The Titan's voice was low. "And no one deserves faith that feeds the flame." He raised his hand once more, and the gauntlet ignited. Power surged outward, sweeping across the ruins. Every demon screamed as their forms disintegrated, their essence hurled back into the warp. The blast shattered what remained of the cathedral, sending fragments of holy icons into the night sky. When the silence returned, Thanos stood alone amid the ruin. The world was still burning, the sky bleeding light. The gauntlet's glow faded once more, its stones dim and cold. The Titan knelt, pressing his hand to the ground. He could feel the corruption beneath it, alive, pulsing, infinite. He understood now that destruction was not enough. The warp was not merely a plague to be burned away. It was the soul of this universe, tangled with every thought and every act of belief. To erase it, he would need to unmake all that sustained it. Hope, fear, will itself. He rose, his voice little more than a whisper. "If faith sustains the disease, then faith must die." Far above, unseen by mortal eyes, the warp shivered, and in its depths, something vast turned its gaze toward the Titan, intrigued. The fires of Coldrazvor burned for 3 days when the Inquisition's flagship descended through the poisoned clouds. The war had long since ended, but the world still groaned under the weight of unseen corruption. Every sensor on the orbiting fleet screamed of psychic contamination. Yet there was no enemy to be found, only silence, ash, and the lingering presence of something vast. Inquisitor Armand Vera stood upon the bridge, eyes fixed on the scorched surface below. He was a man carved from duty, his augmetic eye glowing faintly beneath the brim of his black hat. His armor bore the sigil of the Inquisition's Ordo Malleus, gleaming faintly beneath the red light. The reports from the surviving guardsmen had been fragmented, incoherent. They spoke of a figure descending from the heavens, of demons torn apart by invisible power, and of a cathedral turned to dust by a single gesture. He did not believe in miracles. Only in evidence. "A prepared descent," he ordered, his voice quiet but absolute. Hours later, the Inquisitor's shuttle broke through the storm, landing upon what had once been the Ecclesiarchy's grand plaza. The smell of ash filled the air, thick enough to taste. Around him, his retinue spread out, servo skulls buzzing, auspex scanners sweeping. Sister Captain Ilara of the Adepta Sororitas walked at his side, her armor still scorched from prior campaigns. She traced the burned symbols on the ground with her gauntlet. "These marks," she murmured. She murmured. "Are they not warp scorch? Something else burned here." Vera knelt, examining the pattern. It was no sigil of chaos, yet it pulsed faintly, a residual energy he could neither classify nor dismiss. He brushed his fingers across it. The sensation was wrong, cold, but ancient, like the weight of judgment itself. A servo skull drifted toward him, its vox crackling. A movement detected 200 meters north. He rose, cloak swirling. "Show me." The ruins of the cathedral loomed ahead, its shattered spire pointing accusingly at the sky. As they approached, Ilara froze. The air here was heavy, vibrating with unseen pressure. Around the entrance lay the remains of demons. Fused into the stone, their bodies half real, half smoke. Each one had died in silence, not banishment, but annihilation. And in the center of the desecrated nave stood a figure. He was enormous, even by Astarte's standards. His armor was not of any known pattern, dark, smooth, and gleaming with an otherworldly sheen. On his left hand, something glowed faintly, a gauntlet of gold and steel etched with lines that pulsed like veins of molten light. The man stood before a shattered altar, motionless, his gaze turned toward the dying embers of candles that no wind could extinguish. Vera's instinct screamed of danger. He raised his inferno pistol, his mind brushing the psychic wards woven into his armor. "Identify yourself." The giant turned his head slightly, eyes glowing like twin dying stars. "You are not what this world needs," he said, voice deep and resonant, each word a vibration in the bones. Ilara took a step forward, bolter aimed. "Enil, heretic, you stand in the Emperor's house." "The Emperor," Thanos murmured, as if tasting the word. Another god of order claiming to stand against the storm. Another lie built upon bones, her expression hardened. A blasphemy confirmed. She fired. Bolter rounds tore through the air, each one a miniature explosion of consecrated wrath. They struck his chest, but the Titan did not fall. The impact echoed like distant thunder. Smoke cleared. He stood unbroken. The rounds had not even pierced the armor. He looked at her not with anger, but with something colder. "Pity. You fight for a god who cannot save you," he said. Vera's finger tightened on the trigger of his inferno pistol. A single bolt of plasma screamed across the hall, striking Thanos squarely in the chest. The explosion scorched the stone, the heat bending metal. For a moment, the world burned white. When the glare faded, Thanos was still standing. The gauntlet flared, its stones awakening in response to the threat. Space itself bent, warping around him like ripples across water. Vera stumbled back, his visor flashing warnings as gravity convulsed. Ilara fell to one knee, gasping as her armor systems flickered. Then it stopped. The Titan lowered his hand. "You are not my enemy," he said softly. "You are remnants of an empire that forgot why it existed. I have seen your kind before, in every universe that fell." Vera steadied himself, forcing his will through the fear clawing at his mind. "You speak as though you stand apart from corruption, yet I can feel it bleeding from you. The warp stains everything it touches." Thanos regarded the Inquisitor for a long moment. "Perhaps, but I do not serve it. I intend to end it." Vera's augmetic eye flickered, analyzing the readings emanating from the gauntlet. The energy was unlike anything he had encountered, neither psychic nor technological, but something in between. "When the warp," he said, voice edged with disbelief. "Even the Emperor does not claim such madness. The Emperor is a prisoner of the very chaos he fights," Thanos replied. "He preserves a dying system instead of freeing it. I have seen balance brought through death. I have imposed it upon my own universe. I will do so again." Ilara's voice was hoarse but defiant. "You dare compare yourself to the Emperor? I surpass him," Thanos said simply. The words hung heavy in the air. Vera lifted his weapon again, but this time there was hesitation. "If what you say is true, if you seek to unmake the warp, then you threaten not just chaos but all existence. That is heresy beyond measure. Perhaps, Thanos answered, turning away. But heresy is only truth in exile. He began to walk toward the cathedral's entrance. The air rippled faintly around him, every step bending reality in subtle ways. Vera aimed once more, ready to fire, yet something within him faltered. It was not fear, but recognition. There was conviction in this being, a kind of divine logic that mirrored the Emperor's own, stripped of sanctity and adorned in inevitability. "Stop him," Ilara hissed, raising her bolter again. Vera did not move. "No," he said quietly. "Not yet." The Titan stepped into the light. Above, the clouds began to twist once more, forming a spiral that glowed with the color of the warp's wound. The gauntlet pulsed in answer, feeding on the storm. The air hummed, alive with energy. Ilara turned to her commander, voice sharp with fear. "What is he doing?" Vera's gaze followed the giant as he raised his hand to the heavens. "He is calling it," the Inquisitor whispered. "Whatever dwells beyond the veil." And high above, the warp began to stir. The sky of Caldra's IV convulsed as if struck by an invisible hammer. The warp responded to Thanos' summons like a wounded beast, its colorless storms twisting into spirals of incandescent rage. The air itself screamed. Inquisitor Vera and his retinue fell to their knees, clutching their heads as unseen voices clawed at their thoughts. Even the machines wailed, their spirits howling through broken vox lines. Thanos stood unmoved. The gauntlet upon his left hand blazed with power, the stones writhing as if alive, their light pulsing in uneven rhythm. The power stone's violet glow crackled like thunder. The soul stone burned a dark red, its inner flame flickering erratically. The gauntlet was no longer merely a tool. It was feeding. The warp poured its essence into it, like blood filling an open wound. The Titan's body shuddered. He felt the energy coursing through his veins, reshaping the very structure of his being. His armor split in places, molten fissures glowing beneath the surface of his skin. The stones screamed in unison, a sound only he could hear. They were not made for this universe. Their essence was unraveling and yet adapting. Vera forced himself upright, every word a struggle through the pressure crushing his lungs. "You cannot control it," he rasped. "Whatever you have awakened, it's consuming you." Thanos did not answer. His gaze was distant, his mind somewhere beyond the material plane. Through the gauntlet he saw across realities, echoes of worlds that should not exist, each reflecting the warp's hunger. He glimpsed oceans of psychic flame, fields of dead gods and stars that screamed as they were devoured by thought. The warp had noticed him. It was studying him, tasting him. The time stone flickered. For an instant the world froze. The Titan saw every moment layered upon itself. The Inquisitor reaching for his pistol, Ilara falling to her knees in prayer, the cathedral collapsing under the weight of unseen gravity. Each second folded inward, a fractal of infinite repetition. Then, with a sound like shattering glass, time resumed. The gauntlet flared violently. Energy surged outward in a wave that flattened the ruins and hurled Vera backward. He crashed through a broken wall, his armor sparking, his augmetic eye flickering with static. Ilara screamed his name, but her voice was lost in the roar of the storm. Thanos looked down at his hand. The metal had fused into his flesh, veins of gold and crimson spreading up his arm. The stones pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat, as though his soul and their essence had begun to merge. For a fleeting instant he saw not the battlefield, but a mirror, his reflection gazing back with eyes of fire and shadow. The figure spoke in his own voice. "You cannot unmake what was never meant to be undone." He tore his gaze away. "I am balance," he growled through clenched teeth. "We am the end of chaos." The warp laughed. It echoed through the clouds, through the ground, through the bones of every dying soldier buried beneath the ash. The laughter was not mockery. It was amusement, ancient and knowing. Ilara staggered to her feet, her armor blackened by the energy wave. She clutched her bolter but did not fire. "Inquisitor," she gasped, "we must fall back. This is beyond demoncraft. It's rewriting reality." Vera rose slowly, his face pale but his voice steady. "No, we observe, we learn, we learn. If this creature truly seeks to end the warp, then we must know what price he pays to do it." Above them, the clouds tore apart. From the rent in the sky descended shapes of impossible grandeur, figures made of living thought and burning void. They took form as they fell, titanic entities of shifting color and grotesque beauty, wings of light unfurling across the heavens. Their presence warped the very air, bending the ruins beneath their gaze. Thanos turned his eyes upward. He did not need to ask what they were. The gods of the warp had come. The ground split open beneath him as the Power Stone flared again. The Titan's mind filled with visions, battlefields beyond measure, rivers of blood flowing across galaxies, worshippers screaming his name. The gauntlet wanted to act, to claim dominion, to feed. It craved the essence of these beings, for their power was infinite and eternal. Thanos resisted. He clenched his jaw, forcing his arm downward, the golden veins burning like molten metal beneath his skin. "I will not be your vessel," he hissed. "I command you." The gauntlet pulsed in defiance. The stones flared with chaotic life, each one burning brighter as if laughing at his words. His body convulsed as raw energy tore through him. Memories flooded his mind, every world he had destroyed, every life he had judged unworthy. Yet now he saw them differently. Not as sacrifice, but as nourishment for something that could never be sated. A revelation struck him. The warp was not an enemy to be slain. It was a reflection of will itself. Every act of dominance, every assertion of control fed its existence. Even this attempt to erase it was another offering to its endless hunger. He fell to one knee, the ground around him cracking under the pressure of his presence. The gauntlet dimmed, its power fluctuating wildly. The warp above shifted colors, uncertain, as though amused by the irony of his struggle. Vera approached cautiously, weapon drawn but trembling. "What are you?" he demanded. "A god, a machine, or something worse?" Thanos looked up, eyes burning like dying stars. "I am the consequence," he said. The Inquisitor hesitated, words failing him. The Titan's voice carried a gravity that defied comprehension. It was not arrogance, but truth, spoken by one who understood what it meant to bear the weight of balance and doom. A silence settled, broken only by the whisper of ash. Then, without warning, the gauntlet flared again, brighter than before. The stones screamed as they tore against the fabric of the warp, creating a ripple that spread outward into the void. The gods stirred. The veil between worlds trembled. Thanos rose, blood dripping from the seams of his armor. His face was grim, resolute. The warp had challenged him. The gauntlet had betrayed him, yet his will did not falter. He lifted his hand toward the bleeding sky, and the universe itself seemed to hold its breath. "Then let the gods come," he said softly. "Let them see what defiance truly means." And somewhere deep within the Imperium, something ancient smiled, for the Titan's struggle had only just begun. The warp churned above the dying world, the air thick with distortion and dread. The gauntlet's last pulse had not gone unanswered. The fabric of reality tore open, spilling light that was not light, radiance woven from madness and will. The Inquisitor and his surviving soldiers fell to the ground, covering their faces as shadows took form across the sky. The gods had come. Thanos stood unmoving in the storm, the earth cracking beneath his feet as his gaze rose to meet them. The warp's clouds parted, revealing 4 vast figures suspended within the cosmic wound, each impossibly immense, their forms reflections of the universe's most terrible truths. First came Khorne, the Lord of Battle, seated upon a throne of skulls that burned with molten blood. His armor gleamed red and brass, his laughter rolling like artillery through the heavens. "So," the war god thundered, "the Titan calls to the abyss and demands to stand as its equal." Every word shook the air, scattering flames like rain. From the mist of shifting color emerged Tizanj, ever-changing, a serpent of fire and eyes. "Not equal," it whispered in 1,000 voices that echoed inside the mind. "He seeks to unmake what cannot be unmade. What cannot be unmade. To break the thought that births all thought. Admirable and foolish." Behind them the world trembled as a sweet, discordant melody slithered through the void. Slaanesh appeared in form both exquisite and unbearable, beauty carved from agony, voice dripping with honey and venom alike. How curious, it purred. A god who denies desire yet burns with it. He dreams of balance while his heart starves for control. And finally the air curdled. The scent of rot spread as a colossal shadow rose behind them, bloated and smiling, a figure of decay and affection. Nurgle's laughter was low and gentle, like a father's comfort twisted into despair. "Ooh, little one," he rumbled. "You do not seek to destroy the warp, you seek to cleanse it. How sad, there is no cleansing of life's decay." The 4 stood as one, filling the heavens with impossible grandeur, their combined presence a weight upon the Titan's soul. The gauntlet blazed defiantly in response, its stones sparking as if rebelling against their collective will. Thanos raised his head, his voice deep and steady, resonating even in their realm. "You speak as rulers of this corruption," he said. "But you are nothing but reflections, parasites born from the minds of the weak. You have no dominion outside the thoughts that feed you. Mew. Khorne's laughter shook the world. And yet those thoughts fuel the galaxy's blood. Deny me, Titan, and I shall drown you in your own resolve. Your resolve, Tzench murmured, is the same flame that gives me birth. Your every act of will shapes me anew. You would erase me, yet you cannot lift your hand without feeding me. The Titan's jaw tightened. The gauntlet flared, casting its light against the storm. Then perhaps I must erase myself as well, he said. Slaanesh tilted its head, amused. How tragic it would. He who once worshipped his own destiny now prays for oblivion. Would you cast away all pleasure, all sensation, all triumph, only to be nothing? Nurgle's voice rolled like thunder from beneath the ground. And if you succeed, dear child, the warp dies, yes, but so does life. All things born from love, pain, and hope vanish. You would snuff out every breath, every dream, every whisper of creation. Is that your mercy? A Thanos' silence was answer enough. Khorne rose from his throne, his body wreathed in infernal flame. Then let your mercy be tested in battle. If you wish to unmake the warp, you must first survive its fury. The Titan braced himself as the god's hand extended, larger than continents, descending upon him like a mountain of molten iron. The gauntlet blazed, its stones flaring in perfect unison for the first time since his arrival. He raised his arm, and the impact came like the birth of a star. The world split, mountains shattered into dust. The shockwave rippled into space, tearing the clouds apart. When the light faded, Thanos still stood, kneeling, his armor fractured but alive. Khorne's laughter echoed through the warp. You endure. Good. You are worthy of destruction. Tzench's laughter followed, a sound like pages turning in a book written in screams. Each blow teaches him. Each wound feeds him. Oh, the paradox of will. He grows stronger by resisting the gods he seeks to erase. Thanos rose slowly, smoke curling from his scorched armor. You mistake endurance for submission, he said. Every act of defiance brings me closer to balance. You will not endure it. The gauntlet pulsed again. This time its light extended outward not as an attack but as understanding. For an instant the warp stilled. The gods felt something they had never known, quiet. The constant chorus of pain and temptation faltered. Even the laughter died. Thanos spoke, his voice rising over the silence. You exist because life believes in conflict, in fear, in hunger. But belief can be broken. If I end faith in chaos, I end you. Slaanesh's smile faltered. And what will replace us, Titan? A cold void? An eternity of stillness? You will find it lonelier than any hell. The warp trembled, its color dimming. The gods' forms flickered as though reality itself struggled to maintain them in this new equilibrium. Then from the dark, a whisper not belonging to any of them seeped into Thanos' mind. It was not the voice of a god, but something older, vast, neutral, infinite. You cannot kill thought, child. You can only become the silence between its echoes. The Titan's eyes widened. The warp around him folded inward, spiraling like a dying star. The gods recoiled as the light consumed him, swallowing his form into the core of the storm. When it ended, the battlefield was empty. The Inquisitor looked skyward, his voice trembling. Is he dead? Ilara stared into the heavens, where the tear had sealed into a scar of pale gold. No, she whispered. He's gone deeper. And somewhere within the heart of the Imperium, Thanos opened his eyes, alone, surrounded by the endless whisper of the warp's soul. The god's laughter was gone. Only the silence remained, vast and waiting. Silence enveloped the Titan. No stars, no light. Only the cold pulse of the warp's heartbeat surrounding him. An ocean of thought made flesh. It whispered not as 1,000 voices now, but as one. Patient. Watching. Waiting for him to act. The gauntlet's glow was faint, its stones flickering like dying embers adrift in the dark. Thanos stood within that stillness, motionless, as if listening to the breathing of the void itself. He had faced gods before. He had slaughtered armies, broken worlds, balanced universes upon the edge of his will. Yet never had he felt this, an awareness so absolute it seemed to see through his purpose, peeling him down to the core of what he was. The warp did not rage now. It observed. You seek to silence me, it murmured, its voice neither male nor female, neither near nor far. You misunderstand. I am silence. I am the breath between existence and oblivion. Thanos raised his head, eyes burning faintly. You are corruption. You are the fever that infects creation. You are noise pretending to be truth. The dark laughed softly, endlessly, and yet you came here, Titan, drawn to that noise. Without it, what would you be? The gauntlet pulsed, as though impatient. The stones whispered to him, urgent, desperate. He felt them calling, pleading for release. The Titan slowly lifted his hand. The gesture was deliberate, ceremonial. The same motion he had performed in another universe when he had ended half of all life to restore balance. But this time his goal was higher, greater, final. He whispered, "This time there will be no half measures." The stones blazed to life. Power radiated through him, pure, endless, unbearable. Reality itself seemed to recoil as the stones aligned in perfect harmony. Space screamed. Time froze. The Soul Stone wept light. The Reality Stone twisted upon itself. The Power Stone crackled like the birth of a star. And Thanos snapped his fingers. For a moment the universe trembled. Light exploded outward in every direction, tearing through the warp's fabric like fire through paper. The energy was infinite, transcendent. The Titan's body disintegrated and reformed within the blaze. His very soul stretched across eternity. He expected silence. He expected peace. He expected peace. He expected the end. But instead came laughter. It began as a whisper, soft as a sigh. Then it grew, until it shook the void itself. The light around him twisted, no longer radiant but grotesque, transforming into tendrils of living color. The warp swallowed the explosion, devouring its brilliance, absorbing its power. The very energy of the snap became fuel for the storm he sought to destroy. Thanos fell to his knees, the ground beneath him melting into liquid shadow. The gauntlet burned white-hot, fusing deeper into his flesh. The stones screamed, not in defiance, but agony. One by one they cracked. The space stone shattered first, releasing a blinding flare that was instantly consumed. The Mind Stone followed, its golden hue bleeding into black. The Power Stone pulsed violently before imploding, its light drawn inward, leaving nothing but smoke and pain. He stared at his hand. The once glorious Infinity Gauntlet was no longer a symbol of control. It was a parasite, veins of gold and fire spreading up his arm, feeding on his life. He could feel the warp's essence crawling beneath his skin, merging with the stone's broken power. The very tool he had wielded to end universes was now becoming one with the madness he despised. The voice returned, louder now, triumphant. "You sought to end me, Titan, but I am not a thing to be destroyed. I am the dream of every mind that has ever feared, hoped, or hungered. You cannot erase what all creation wills to exist." He roared in fury, slamming his fist into the formless ground. The impact sent a wave of energy through the void, tearing fissures of white light across the warp. For a moment it seemed as though reality itself faltered. Through the cracks he glimpsed other realms, worlds untouched by chaos, serene and silent. But they were illusions, distant reflections of what could never be. He reached for one, but it slipped away, dissolving into laughter once more. Even now the voice taunted, "You reach for control. You are no different from those who worship power. You are my reflection." Thanos staggered, his breathing heavy, the glow of his eyes dimming. "No," he growled. "I am the balance you pervert. I am the hand that ends all cycles." The voice whispered like silk against his mind. "You are the cycle, Titan." The warp began to shift again. The void around him rippled, reshaping into something new, something alive. Shapes emerged from the darkness, echoes of his own face twisted by chaos, each wearing a version of the gauntlet fused into their flesh. They surrounded him, silent, watching. 1,000 Thanos born from the failure of the snap, reflections of the will that fed the very realm he sought to end. He looked upon them, and for the first time doubt flickered in his eyes. Each mirrored him perfectly, his rage, his resolve, his belief in balance. The warp had not been destroyed by his act of will. It had multiplied it, immortalized it. Every echo was a fragment of his defiance, now turned against him. The laughter returned, rising into a chorus, the 1,000 voices of himself and the warp merging into one. "See now what you have wrought," the voice said. "You have not ended chaos. You have become its god." Thanos fell silent. Around him the reflections began to fade into mist, merging back into the sea of thought. The gauntlet dimmed once more, its stones little more than dull crystals embedded in charred metal. He clenched his fist, the sound of creaking gold echoing through the stillness. Then he stood. His voice was low, ragged, but steady. "If destruction feeds you, then I will give you creation instead." The warp hesitated, its laughter faltering, uncertain. Thanos turned toward the void's horizon, where light and darkness met in endless tension. "You cannot devour what does not resist. You cannot twist what has no will to bend." His gaze hardened. "I will become the stillness you cannot touch, And with that, the Titan walked into the dark, each step sinking deeper into the heart of the warp, his form dissolving into shadow and light, until there was nothing left but silence. The laughter faded. The storm quieted. The storm quieted. For the first time in eons, the warp did not know whether it had won or whether it had been deceived. The silence that followed Thanos' final words stretched across eternity. The warp held its breath. The storm that had once consumed worlds now hung motionless, suspended between thought and existence. For a time there was nothing, no movement, no sound, only the echo of what he had said, rippling outward like a stone cast into a bottomless sea. But silence in the warp is never peace. It is the moment before revelation. The stillness began to fracture. At first it was subtle, a whisper in the dark, a flicker of motion at the edge of unreality. Then came the murmurs, faint but rising, the voices of the dead and the damned reforming like mist around a single point. The void where Thanos had vanished pulsed once, twice, and then exploded in light. From that wound came screams, human, Xenos, demon, all bound together in a single endless note of suffering. Across the galaxy, psychers convulsed, astropaths bled from their eyes. Navigators howled as their minds touched the disturbance. Every world connected to the Imperium felt it. On Terra, the choir of the Astronomicon faltered for the briefest heartbeat. The Emperor's light dimmed. A shadow passed through every dream, a thought that was not thought. The Titan endures. On Caldra's 4th, the fires still burned. Inquisitor Vera knelt beside the ruins of the cathedral, his armor cracked, his faith shaken. The storm above had vanished, leaving behind a sky of dull gray, but he could feel it. The vibration in the air, the unnatural weight pressing down upon his soul. Something had changed in the warp's current, something immense and terrible. Ilara stood beside him, her armor blackened by ash, her voice barely more than a whisper. "He's gone, isn't he?" Vera looked up. "No," he said. "Nothing that powerful simply vanishes, Uze." He stared toward the horizon where the faint shimmer of the warp still lingered, a scar in the fabric of space. He did something. I can feel it in the quiet. The quiet was spreading. Throughout the segmentum solar, reports flooded in, psychers unable to hear the immaterium, demons dissolving mid-manifestation, warp storms collapsing into eerie calm. Ships lost in the warp emerged suddenly into real space, their crews alive but wrong, eyes empty, voices hollow. Some whispered of seeing a figure of gold and shadow walking through the void, touching each of them, taking something from within before letting them go. The Adeptus Astra Telepathica called it Other Silence of Caldra's, but the name did not capture its dread. For what was truly occurring was not silence, it was suppression. In the heart of the Immaterium Thanos walked, or something that had once been Thanos. His form was less a body now, and more a shape of intent, a figure sculpted from golden light, flickering at its edges where fragments of reality could not decide if he belonged. The gauntlet had fused completely with him, its metal veins now indistinguishable from his being. The stones no longer glowed, yet their essence pulsed faintly within him, feeding, changing. The warp recoiled where he walked. Demons that once roamed freely now fell to their knees or fled screaming as his presence approached. Each step consumed them, not by fire, not by violence, but by unbeing. Where they fell, no echo remained, as if they had never existed at all. The dead began to follow him. First came the souls of those lost to the warp, their tattered remnants drawn like moths to a dying flame. Then came others, millions of voices, remnants of warriors, martyrs, and sinners alike. They formed around him a spectral army of light and shadow, eyes hollow, bound not by faith but by absence. They moved as one, silent, obedient, without thought or hunger. They were not alive, nor were they truly dead. They were emptied. And as he passed through the shifting plains of madness, the warp began to change in his wake. The roiling storm stilled, the screaming seas of thought flattened into glass. Even the air lost its color, fading into pale gray. For the first time in its existence, the warp began to starve. Thanos stopped upon a ridge of obsidian that overlooked a valley of shifting flesh and bone. The horrors below, creatures born of despair and desire, writhed and clawed at themselves as the color drained from their bodies. The Titan watched without expression as they dissolved into dust, their essence absorbed into the quiet that followed him like a shadow. "Well, you cannot destroy me," the warp whispered. Its voice was fractured now, its tone desperate. "You're only replacing me." Thanos' reply was calm, measured. "Perhaps that is what you were meant to teach me. The universe does not need gods, it needs equilibrium. And what are you then?" the voice hissed, splintering into echoes. I am inevitability, he said. The warp shuddered. The legion behind him, those emptied souls, raised their heads as one. They did not speak, yet their presence amplified his will. Their emptiness became a weapon. The gods felt it, every one of them. Khorne roared in fury as his rivers of blood began to dry. Slaanesh screamed as its music fell to silence. Nurgle wept as his gardens withered into grey dust. Thanos writhed, his endless schemes unraveling into nothingness. For every moment Thanos existed in this form, their dominion diminished. They struck at him, each unleashing their essence in waves of fire, poison, lust, and madness. But each attack dissolved before reaching him, consumed by the stillness. He moved through their fury like a shadow through light, untouched. When the assault ended, he stood before the remnants of the gods themselves, flickering, uncertain, diminished to mere fragments of their former glory. You cannot win, the warp whispered again, weaker now. You would erase all thought, all will, all life. Thanos' gaze turned toward the horizon where the faint shimmer of real space glimmered beyond the barrier. If that is the price of peace, he said, then so be it. The legion behind him stirred, their countless forms merging into a sea of pale light. For the first time, the warp knew fear. And somewhere, on 1,000 worlds, Psyche screamed as the Imperium grew colder still, its color fading, its pulse slowing, its gods retreating into silence. The age of chaos was trembling, and at its center, the Titan walked, alone, unrelenting, followed by his silent army of the lost. The warp storms were dying. Across the galaxy, the Imperium flickered like a candle in a collapsing wind. Warp routes once plagued by chaos were suddenly calm. Astropathic transmissions traveled unhindered. Demons screamed as their existence thinned, dissolving into motes of nothing. And yet the Imperium of man did not rejoice, for the silence that replaced the screams was far more terrifying. On Kaldras Rei, where the Titan had first stepped into reality, the skies were clear for the first time in 10,000 years. The grey light of the dying sun bled through smoke and ruin, revealing what remained of the Ecclesiarchy's holy city. The air smelled of ash and ozone, of a world caught between life and extinction. Inquisitor Vera stood at the edge of the cathedral's ruin, his eyes hollow from sleepless nights. The reports were consistent and all impossible. Whole regiments had vanished in the quiet, ships adrift in the void had returned with their crews intact but voiceless. On dozens of worlds, statues of unknown origin were appearing, colossal robed figures carved from black stone, their faces obscured, their left hands raised as if in benediction. The faithful called them miracles. The Inquisition called them warnings. And in the center of it all was the name whispered by both sinner and saint alike, Thanos. They called him the Saint of Despair. Vera despised the title. He is no saint, he muttered, staring at a fresco hastily painted on the surviving cathedral wall. It depicted a giant figure standing amid ash and fire, surrounded by pale souls. His hand glowed with celestial light, but his eyes were empty. The artist had scrawled beneath it a prayer. He ended the pain. Sister Captain Elera stood nearby, her armor freshly anointed with oil, though her gaze was troubled. The people believe he has silenced the warp, she said quietly. The some worlds report fewer demon incursions. Entire hive cities have stopped hearing voices in the dark. The ecclesiarchs are calling it deliverance. A deliverance, Vera repeated bitterly. At what cost? The warp is the soul of humanity. Its death is the death of thought itself. He is not freeing us, he's erasing us. She hesitated before replying. And yet, when I pray now, I feel nothing. No whispers, no temptations, only peace. The Inquisitor turned sharply. A peace, his voice cracked with fury. A peace is not silence, sister. It is choice. You cannot pray to nothing. Her eyes lowered, but she said nothing more. Far above them, unseen, the warp continued to unravel. Thanos' march through the Imperium had become legend even among the demons that still clung to form. He was no longer a man, nor god, nor machine. His body was light wrapped in purpose, and his legion of the lost followed him in perfect step, consuming all sound and color in their wake. Planets that touched his presence through the veil felt it as cold winds, as dreams of grey skies and still oceans, and in the quiet that followed, mortals wept and called it salvation. Yet not all saw him as deliverer. On a distant shrine world, deep within the Segmentum Tempestus, a gathering of high ecclesiarchs and inquisitors convened. The hall was dimly lit, candles trembling in the stagnant air. Around the table stood men and women whose faith had never faltered, even in the face of demonkind. But the thing they discussed now was not heresy born of sin. It was heresy born of despair. "The reports are consistent," said Lord Inquisitor Halbrecht, his face drawn and pale. "Wherever this being passes, psychic energy collapses. Demons cease to exist. Warp storms close. But so too do the souls of men fade. Entire populations cease dreaming. There are no visions, no prophecies. It is as if the Emperor himself has turned his face away." A cardinal clutched his rosary tight. "You speak as though this Thanos rivals our Lord. Our Lord, he does not rival," another whispered. "He replaces." A silence fell that none dared break. In the distance the void stirred. Thanos was moving again. Within the warp he crossed a plane of black glass that had once been a realm of endless battle. Now the blood had dried to dust, and the banners of the fallen lay still. The gauntlet pulsed faintly, though it no longer burned with hunger. It simply existed, part of him, neither tool nor curse. The Legion marched behind him in perfect silence, countless souls stripped of identity, bound by the gravity of his will. Ahead he saw light. He saw light. Not the chaotic glow of the warp, but a pure radiance unlike anything that realm had known. At its center stood a woman in armor of white and gold, kneeling beside a broken sword. Her head was bowed in prayer. Thanos approached slowly. Why? Her armor was scorched, her insignia worn, but the mark upon her chest was clear, the sigil of the ecclesiarchy. A sister of battle. Her lips moved soundlessly, her rosary clutched in trembling hands. He stopped before her. "Why do you pray?" he asked. "When you know none are listening." She lifted her gaze, tears carving clean lines through the ash on her face. "If none are listening," she said softly, "then I pray to remind myself I am still here." For the first time in an eternity, the Titan paused. Her words cut through the stillness like light through fog. She did not fear him, though her body trembled. There was no defiance, no submission, only the simple will to remember. He looked down at the gauntlet, its stones pulsing faintly as if echoing her voice. "A faith sustains the disease," he said. "Utsin. It feeds the gods that enslave you. I have ended their reach." The sister smiled weakly. "Then perhaps you've ended us too. Without faith, what are we?" The question lingered. Thanos turned his gaze upward, where the horizon glimmered with the dim outline of the Imperium beyond the veil. "Perhaps," he said after a long pause, "that is what I must learn." The sister closed her eyes, whispering her final prayer into the silence. When she opened them again, the Titan was gone, leaving behind only the echo of his steps and a world without voices. And far beyond, across the dark between stars, the Emperor stirred upon his golden throne. For the first time in millennia he felt it, the warp's pulse fading, the silence creeping ever closer, the hand of something neither mortal nor divine reaching toward the heart of terror. Deep within the Imperium's hollow heart, the light of the gods flickered like dying embers. The warp was quiet, subdued beneath a weight none of its rulers had ever known. Its endless screaming had fallen into uneasy stillness. The great tides of emotion, rage, lust, ambition, decay no longer surged as they once did. A terrible equilibrium was forming. The silence Thanos carried spread across their domains, stripping meaning from sin and hunger alike. Upon a plain woven from the bones of forgotten empires, the four powers gathered. Khorne, his throne of skulls cracked and dimmed, glared into the void where rivers of blood had once flowed. Teensunch circled above him in restless motion, feathers dull, countless eyes watching the dim horizon where thought itself seemed to fade. Slaanesh reclined amid a pit of glass and shadow, their once sweet song reduced to a broken hum. Nurgle sat furthest back, his great bulk still and contemplative, cradling something invisible in his decaying hands. None spoke at first. The warp had never known silence, and it terrified them. Finally Teensunch broke it. His voice was 1,000 tones layered and uneven. The weave unravels. Thought collapses. The threads that bind possibility are thinning. If this continues, all things, hope, desire, will cease to move. The song of the universe will die. Khorne's growl shook the plain. Then find him and kill him, his fanged mouth curled into a snarl. This Titan walks through my realm and my warriors no longer bleed. My rage finds no purchase in his shadow. He mocks my purpose. Slaanesh's laughter was soft, tired. Your rage is a cage of your own making. He does not mock you, Khorne. He denies you. Khorne, he denies you. There is no beauty in violence when no one feels it. No art in suffering when no one desires release. They turned their gaze toward the dim sky, where light twisted into faint spirals. His silence consumes even pleasure. It makes me numb. I cannot remember why I crave. You always were dramatic, Thanos muttered. What he does is not destruction, it is symmetry. He has become the equation that cancels itself. Nurgle's voice rose slowly, warm as rot, gentle as decay, and yet he spreads like a sickness. His stillness grows, and with it death without rebirth. No seed takes root in his wake, he ends the cycle. The ancient god looked upon his withered garden, grey, brittle, lifeless. His smile was gone. There is no joy in a world that does not rot, for rot is life reborn. Khorne's gauntleted fist struck the ground, shaking the realm. Enough? Words are the refuge of cowards. If the warp dies, so do we. We will not fade into memory while that thing still walks. Tzeentch's countless faces turned toward him, each speaking at once. And if striking him only feeds his equilibrium, each act of defiance strengthens his purpose. He is no longer a creature of the Imperium. He is the manifestation of our consequence. The blood god's snarl deepened, but even he knew the truth. The warp had never faced an enemy who fought without passion, without fury, without desire. Thanos waged a war of subtraction. Where they were chaos, he was absence. Where they fed on extremes, he brought perfect balance, an unmaking of their essence. A shape emerged between them, a shadow deeper than the dark around it, a figure born of the warp's own will. It spoke with no single voice, but with the blended echo of all four gods. We cannot fight him as we are, it said. He does not feed, he does not fear, he does not fear. His will exists outside our creation. To destroy him, we must rewrite him. Thanos tilted his head, intrigued. A paradox, then. The voice nodded. To end the silence, we must give it form. He must be made part of what he opposes. Slaanesh smiled faintly, their eyes glimmering with a faint echo of old desire. You would make him a god of the warp. A not make, said the voice, a reveal. The plane trembled as the idea took root. For the first time in eons, the four agreed. If they could not destroy Thanos, they would corrupt him, not with temptation, but with purpose. To define him was to claim him. If he became the balance of the warp, then he would serve its eternity. Khorne rose to his feet, chains rattling, his eyes burning. Then summon him. Let him face us not as hunter but as heir. Tzeentch's wings spread, shimmering faintly as forgotten colors return to the air. He walks near the eye. His silence has reached the edge of the maelstrom. He will hear us. The gods turned their combined gaze toward the warp's horizon, where reality itself twisted. Their power merged into a single pulse that rippled across eternity, a call written into the fabric of madness. And Thanos heard it. Far away in the grey wastelands of unbeing, the Titan halted. The legion of the lost froze behind him, motionless as statues. He felt the summons pull at his mind, a vibration deeper than thought, speaking in the tone of inevitability. The gauntlet fused into his arm, flared with faint color, the first light it had shown in an age. He looked up, eyes glowing faintly. The warp trembled in response. "A come," the voice of the gods whispered. "A come and take your throne." For a moment he did not move. Then he began to walk, each step reverberating through creation. With every stride, fragments of the warp's color returned, though muted, hesitant. He could feel the gods watching, their presence heavy, their desperation masked as grandeur. When he finally spoke, his voice echoed across the void. "You would make me part of your madness," he said. "You mistake balance for submission." Still he advanced, drawn toward the storm's heart. For the first time since his arrival, the warp anticipated his coming not with fear, but with reverence. And as he entered the gathering of gods, even Khorne fell silent. The air of the Imperium was still when Thanos stepped into the circle of gods. The plains of bone and blood had become an expanse of shimmering light, a mockery of serenity conjured for his arrival. Above him, the heavens bled hues unseen by mortal eyes, echoes of forgotten creation, and within that radiance four shadows loomed. The ruinous powers had not appeared so united since the dawn of time, and yet there was no harmony in their presence, only necessity. Thanos stood in silence. His armor, once cracked and scorched, had begun to heal itself, threads of gold and ash knitting together into seamless perfection. The gauntlet fused into his arm pulsed faintly, its stones dim yet alive, whispering in rhythms that were not entirely his own. His eyes burned with restrained purpose as he gazed upon the assembled pantheon. Khorne rose first, his voice thunder breaking across the horizon. "You stand before gods, Titan. You who would silence eternity with your arrogance." His throne of skulls creaked as his hand gripped its arm, claws gouging the bone. "You speak of balance while denying the truth that life is conflict. Thanos' gaze did not waver. A conflict without purpose is decay. You are not life, Khorne. You are its exhaustion. The blood god's laughter was deep and terrible. Then face me. If you can silence war, I will kneel before your balance. But the challenge never reached its end. Tzenchi's laughter cut through it, soft, melodic, and cruel. He does not come to fight, my dear Khorne. He comes to fulfill what you cannot understand. He does not destroy, he rewrites. The Lord of Change drifted downward, his form splitting into 1,000 shifting reflections. You believe yourself above corruption, Titan. But what is your silence if not another form of control? Thanos turned toward him. A control is not my aim. I bring stillness so that life may see itself without distortion. Slaanesh's voice slithered through the air, low and melodic. Without distortion, they purred. Without hunger, without desire, you would make the galaxy a graveyard of perfect calm. You would strip existence of meaning. I have seen your kind before, Titan. Those who mistake peace for order and call it virtue. Their smile was beautiful and venomous. Even now, beneath your resolve, I can feel it. You crave victory. That is desire. That is me. The gauntlet flared. A wave of gold light swept across the plain, pushing back the creeping tendrils of their influence. The gods recoiled as their words faltered. Thanos' voice, when it came, was quiet but absolute. You are echoes. Parodies of will. You feed on what mortals cannot control, and you call it power. But your strength ends where choice begins. The plain shuddered. The air thickened with tension. Nurgle rose from the shadows, his vast decaying form dripping with stagnant sweetness. Yet in his hollow eyes there was no malice, only sorrow. A choice, child, you speak of it as if it were freedom. But freedom is suffering. Mortals pray to me not because they crave disease, but because they cannot bear to live without purpose. You would deny them even that. Even that. In faced him. I would free them from the need to pray. And in doing so, Nurgle rumbled, you would become the god you despise. The words struck something deep within him. The Titan stood still, feeling the weight of them sink into his mind. The silence around him grew heavier, as if the warp itself waited for his reply. I am not your god, he said finally. I am the end of gods. Tzenchi's laughter rippled through the air once more. The end of gods, he echoed mockingly. Do you not see the irony, Titan? You are already one of us. You define yourself through opposition, through purpose born of chaos. You are the still point around which eternity spins. You cannot destroy the warp because you are now its balance. You are the paradox. The gauntlet burned brighter, reacting to the truth buried in those words. Thanos could feel the warp flowing through him, its essence crawling beneath his skin. His form flickered, shifting between flesh and thought, between light and shadow. He could feel their truth pressing upon him like gravity. He had become both destroyer and creator, silence and song, a vessel for the very thing he sought to end. The gods sensed it too. They saw the subtle change in his aura, the merging of purpose and corruption. Khorne's lips curled into a grim smile. He bleeds, the blood god growled. He breaks, Tzenchi's voice whispered across the plain. No, he becomes. The warp trembled as if holding its breath. The light of the gauntlet surged, consuming the sky. For a fleeting moment, Thanos felt every atom of creation resonate within him. The living and the dead, the sinners and the saints, the cries of the damned and the prayers of the faithful. All of it converged into one, infinite moment of understanding, and in that instant he saw himself reflected in the eyes of the gods, not as their enemy but as their mirror. He staggered, his hand gripping the air as if to steady the cosmos itself. The gauntlet stones flared violently, each one fracturing under the strain of his realization. He felt his mind stretch across all realities, touching worlds beyond this one, some filled with light, others with endless void. The warp's voices rose in unison, a chorus of awe and dread. You see it now, Tzench whispered. To erase chaos, you must become its symmetry. Thanos' jaw tightened. Then I will be its final reflection. The words unleashed a storm. Power erupted from him in waves of golden flame, colliding with the very essence of the warp. The gods reeled, their domains fracturing under the weight of the blast. The plain shattered. Mountains of bone turned to dust. The warp screamed, not in agony, but in revelation. When the light faded, Thanos stood alone. The gauntlet was gone, dissolved into his being. His eyes glowed with twin flames of creation and entropy. Around him, the gods lingered as shadows, diminished yet smiling. You cannot unmake what you are, Slaanesh whispered. He looked upon them with something that was not hatred, nor pity, but acceptance. "Then I will carry it," he said. The warp pulsed once as if acknowledging his vow. Then the gods vanished, leaving only the echo of their laughter. And in the silence that followed, Thanos understood. He was no longer simply a titan, nor a conqueror, nor a destroyer. He was the paradox that kept existence from collapsing, the stillness that allowed the storm to breathe. The silence that followed his transformation did not remain contained within the warp. It spilled outward like an unseen tide, rippling across the veil that divided the immaterial from the real. On the surface of 1,000 worlds, the signs began to manifest. Astropaths went blind in unison. Navigators cried out as the Astronomicon flickered, its golden light dimming for the first time in living memory. Across the segmentum solar, the Emperor's psychic beacon, the pulse of humanity's survival, grew weaker, as if another presence had begun to draw from its strength. Within the sanctum of Terra, beneath the shadow of the Imperial Palace, alarms screamed through marble corridors. The Adeptus Custodes moved with machine precision, golden armor gleaming beneath the light of burning censers. The High Lords of Terra argued in panic, their words drowned by the chanting of the ecclesiarchy as priests flooded the streets, proclaiming the Emperor's imminent test. None could name the source of the disturbance, only that something vast was moving toward the throne world, something that bent reality itself around its advance. And through that storm of fear, the Inquisition delivered the truth. "He comes," Vera said, his voice echoing through the council chamber. His armor was blackened by warp burn, his face marked by sleepless nights. A Thanos, the one they call the Saint of Despair, the creature that silenced the warp. He walks toward Terra. A wave of disbelief rippled through the hall. The Lord Commander Militant slammed his gauntlet against the table. "They myth. The warp cannot die." Vera met his gaze unflinching. "And yet it bleeds." The chamber fell silent. The Custodes Commander Valerian stepped forward. "If what you say is true, then he threatens the Golden Throne itself. If the warp falters, the Emperor's flame will follow." Vera nodded once. "He does not come to worship or destroy. He comes to end everything." Hours later, the sky above Terra split open. A rift formed high above the palace spires, a wound of gold and shadow stretching across the heavens. The storm that emerged was not of the warp's chaos, but of something purer, colder, and far more absolute. Within that light walked a figure immense and solitary. He descended as if gravity itself bowed before him, his feet touching the ground before the eternity gate with the sound of thunder muted by reverence. The legions of the Adeptus Custodes stood ready in perfect formation, halberds lowered, their armor radiant beneath the glow of the sacred pyres. Eyes. Behind them, lines of Sisters of Battle and inquisitorial stormtroopers filled the courtyards, their hymns rising into the air in desperate defiance. Yet as Thanos advanced, the sound of their voices faltered, the prayers caught in their throats. The closer he came, the less the world itself seemed to breathe. He was changed. His body no longer bore the cracks of mortality, nor the scars of conquest. His form shimmered with translucent light, gold and ash intertwined, the gauntlet fused entirely into his being. His eyes glowed like twin suns seen through fog, and his voice, when it came, resonated through every soul upon the world. "War God is a prisoner," he said. "His throne is cage." A custodian stepped forward, spear raised. "You speak blasphemy on holy ground. Leave this place or be undone." Thanos looked upon him with something that might have been pity. "You defend a dream that feeds the storm I have ended. You guard chains, not divinity. You guard chains, not divinity." The custodian charged. His movement was faster than lightning, his strike flawless, yet before the blade could touch flesh, it disintegrated into dust. The man fell to his knees, his armor corroding, his life extinguished not by force, but by stillness. The others did not retreat. "For the Emperor." The cry broke through the silence like a spark in darkness. Thousands surged forward. Bolters roared, plasma weapons screamed, holy relics blazed with purifying flame. The air filled with the sound of war, the final act of faith against the impossible. Thanos raised his hand. The weapon's fire slowed, then stopped midair, suspended in golden light. The bolts dissolved like mist, their fury devoured by the silence surrounding him. One by one, the soldiers fell still, their armor cracking under invisible pressure. The hymns that had once filled the air faded into whispers. Vera stood at the forefront now, his bolt pistol trembling in his grip. He shouted over the storm, his voice hoarse. "If you destroy him, you destroy us all. Humanity cannot survive without the Emperor." Thanos turned toward him, his gaze calm, unblinking. her gaze calm, unblinking. "Humanity survives because of what you fear. The Emperor chained himself to preserve your faith. I will free him." Vera's knees weakened. Free him? The Titan stepped forward, each motion sending ripples of golden dust into the air. The gates before him, massive constructs of auramite and sanctified steel, groaned as though alive, resisting his will. He placed his hand upon them, and the world trembled. From within the palace, the psychic beacon of the Emperor flared, a wave of burning light that consumed the sky. It struck Thanos like the wrath of a sun. The ground shattered, the heavens screamed, the power of the Emperor poured forth through the gate, searing everything in its path. But Thanos did not fall. He withstood the storm, his form dissolving into light yet refusing to yield. The two forces, divine will and absolute equilibrium, collided in a cataclysm that tore at the fabric of existence. The custards were thrown back. The world split with fractures of fire and gold. In the heart of that collision, Thanos saw him. The Emperor sat upon his throne, eyes closed, bound in fire and machinery. A god made captive by the very faith he inspired. Their gazes met, not through distance but through the weave of eternity itself. And in that single glance no words passed between them. They did not need to. The Titan saw what the Emperor had become, a symbol too vast to live, too sacred to die, a being who bore the burden of an entire species' madness. And the Emperor saw Thanos not as invader, not as heretic, but as the reflection of what he might have become had he chosen peace over dominion. The energy around them surged, reality itself convulsing. For an instant, all creation seemed to hold its breath. And then the gate exploded in light. The heavens burned white. The warp screamed in silence, and across the galaxy, every soul felt the weight of judgment descend. Light consumed the world. Every mortal eye that beheld the explosion at the Eternity Gate went blind, and every soul felt its echo in their marrow. It was not light as humans knew it. It was truth laid bare, unfiltered, unmerciful. The sound of it was silence, a silence that drowned the cries of billions and stilled the heart of terror itself. When the radiance began to fade, the world was not as it had been. The once golden spires of the Imperial Palace were fractured, their surfaces rippling like molten glass. The air shimmered with the residue of psychic force, distorting reality itself. The custards and sisters who had survived the blast knelt wordlessly, unable to speak, their voices stolen by awe and terror alike. At the center of the devastation stood Thanos, motionless amid the ruins of the Eternity Gate. His body was barely tangible now, a being of luminous haze and fractured shadow. The gauntlet was gone, or rather, it had become indistinguishable from him. Every particle of his being glowed with residual energy, strands of the warp and real space interwoven into a paradox of existence. Before him, the gate lay open. Beyond it, golden fire illuminated a chamber of impossible grandeur, the sanctum of the Emperor. Thanos stepped forward. His feet made no sound as they touched the ground, for there was no longer sound where he walked. Every inch of his movement seemed to drain the world of noise, of fear, of faith itself. The legions dared not follow. Even the bravest custards lowered their gaze, unable to meet the presence that emanated from him. Inside the sanctum, the golden throne towered above all things, its machinery weeping golden oil and psychic fire. Wires thicker than serpents pulsed with living energy, veins of a dying god. Upon it sat the Emperor, immense, unmoving, yet alive in a way that defied comprehension. His body was a fusion of bone and light, his flesh both dust and eternity. The air around him shimmered, not with power but with memory. Thanos halted before the steps of the throne. For a long time neither spoke. There were no words fit for this moment. The Titan looked upon the Emperor, and for the first time since he had entered this universe, he felt uncertainty. Here sat not a being of chaos, nor of blind order, but of burden. The Emperor's gaze, though closed, reached him all the same, piercing the veil of silence that cloaked them both. At last Thanos spoke. His voice was not sound but resonance, a thought carried through the air itself. "You have become what you swore to destroy," he said. "A god of endless suffering, sustained by faith that feeds the fire you once sought to end." The Emperor's eyes opened, slow as the turning of worlds. They burned not with light, but with exhaustion immeasurable. "And you," his voice echoed, "not through air, but through the minds of all present, have become the silence you feared. You end chaos by ending will. You bring peace only through the death of choice." Thanos ascended one step, the light of his form reflecting in the Emperor's hollow eyes. "There can be no choice without balance. You have seen what your Imperium has wrought. Billions dying in your name, faith turned to tyranny. The warp thrives because of their madness. I have done what you could not. The Emperor's expression did not change, yet his words carried the weight of sorrow. And in doing so, you have stripped the soul from creation. The warp is not evil, it is the reflection of life. It is the reflection of life. To end it is to end what makes existence meaningful. The warp is disease, Thanos replied. I have seen it devour entire civilizations, twist thought into nightmare. You built your empire upon its leash, and it turned you into its prisoner. Perhaps the Emperor said quietly. But even a prisoner dreams. And in those dreams humanity remembers hope. For a moment, the two beings regarded one another in perfect stillness. Around them, the chamber pulsed with faint, dying energy. Machines groaned. The souls of the Adeptus Mechanicus knelt far below, weeping at the tremor of their god's fading pulse. Yet within that stillness, a shift began to occur, an invisible current flowing between the two titans, neither of flesh nor faith, but of understanding. Thanos raised his hand. Your light cannot endure, he said. The warp will consume what remains of you. Let me end it, and you, and set the universe free from your shadow. The Emperor's gaze softened. You speak as if freedom is without pain, yet all things born from light must cast a shadow. Without it, there is no definition. You would erase contrast itself. Thanos' hand trembled. The power within him surged, the final echo of the stones urging completion. If contrast breeds chaos, then so be it. The Emperor lifted his hand, skeletal, radiant, vast. Their palms met. The impact did not make sound. It was too great for sound. Every world in the galaxy felt the tremor, every mind heard the echo of their meeting. The warp and the material merged for an instant, overlapping like two mirrors facing one another. Within that impossible reflection they saw everything: life, death, purpose, futility, the endless cycle of destruction and rebirth. Then, in a blinding surge, their power intertwined. The warp screamed, not in agony but revelation. The two forces once opposed began to merge. The Emperor's golden fire flowed into Thanos' silence, while Thanos' equilibrium tempered the Emperor's divine fury. Light and shadow fused into something neither divine nor mortal, neither chaos nor order. The throne cracked. The room shuddered. The room shuddered. Reality itself seemed to hesitate, unsure which truth to follow. And then it ended. When the light faded, the throne was empty. The Emperor's body was gone. Thanos too had vanished. Only a faint radiance lingered in the air, a golden mist that neither burned nor chilled. It filled the chamber, silent and infinite. The custards who dared approach later would describe it not as power, but as peace. The warp across the galaxy fell utterly still. The storms ceased. The screaming voices went quiet. For the first time in 10,000 years there was neither prayer nor corruption, only silence. And in that silence, humanity waited, uncertain whether they had been saved or abandoned. The silence that followed the meeting of the two titans was deeper than any void. It spread outward in waves, invisible but absolute, swallowing sound, thought, and even time. The throne world lay still beneath its shroud. Its endless industry and worship halted as if the universe itself were holding its breath. The Astronomicon's beam, the guiding light of humanity, flickered once, then went out. Across the galaxy, warp storms collapsed. Fleets that had been lost for centuries suddenly reappeared, their hulls blackened and crews staring blankly at the stars. Demons, stripped of the warp's pulse, dissolved into ash mid-laughter. Sorcerers screamed as their spells turned to dust in their mouths, and those sensitive to the immaterial felt it most of all. A sensation like the heartbeat of reality had ceased. The galaxy was quiet. Deep within the ruined sanctum, the remnants of the throne smoldered. The great machine was gone, reduced to scorched fragments of gold and bone. The custards stood before the ruin, kneeling in silence, unsure whether they were mourning or witnessing salvation. Vera stood among them, his armor cracked, his eyes hollow. The Inquisitor looked upon the empty dais and whispered, "So it ends." But even as he said it, something stirred. From the ashes rose a shimmer, gold and grey interwoven. Light that did not radiate but drew the eye, commanding reverence and dread alike. It gathered into form, indistinct at first, then resolving into a figure that seemed both man and monument. His outline was familiar, broad, regal, yet changed beyond comprehension. He was neither emperor nor titan, but something between, something greater than either had been alone. Thanos' voice, when it came, resonated through the chamber like the whisper of distant thunder. "It is done." Vera fell to his knees trembling. My lord, what have you done?" The being turned his gaze toward him, and within those eyes burned twin suns, one of judgment, one of mercy. "I have ended the cycle. The warp no longer feeds on thought, nor binds the soul to chaos. It lies dormant, silent. Humanity is free, free," the word escaped Vera like a prayer. "Then the Emperor lives within me," Thanos said softly. "His essence and mine are one. He saw truth in balance. I saw purpose in his burden. Together we have forged stillness where once there was storm." The Inquisitor's lips trembled. "Then, what becomes of us?" Thanos looked beyond the broken walls, where the dawn struggled to pierce the ash-choked sky. "You will live without faith," he said. "Without gods. Without fear of damnation or promise of salvation. The age of divine masters has ended." The custards stirred uneasy. One of them rose, his voice low but steady. "And who, then, will lead us? Without the Emperor there is no Imperium." Thanos' gaze shifted toward him. "Then perhaps there should not be." The words hung heavy in the air, heavier than any command. The golden warriors bowed their heads, unable to meet the weight of them. Beyond the palace walls, the people of Terra felt the change. Pilgrims who had once wept in devotion now stood in bewildered silence. Their prayers found no answer, their icons no longer glowed. The air was thick with confusion and dread, yet beneath it all was something unfamiliar. Peace, no whispers of the warp, no psychic storms, only the soft hum of an unfeeling universe. In that moment, Thanos raised his right hand. The gauntlet's form, though invisible, flickered within his essence, a ghost of what it had once been. The 6 stones glowed faintly within him, their light reflected in the shattered gold beneath his feet. "This universe has known only war," he said quietly. "Its gods and kings are born from its suffering. But if existence is to endure, it must learn what comes after." Energy gathered around him, golden and crimson, bending reality itself into a singular point. The air trembled as his will shaped it. "One final act," he murmured, "not to destroy, but to reset." Vera's eyes widened. "What are you doing?" Thanos looked at him one last time, and for a heartbeat there was something almost human in his gaze. "I will give you silence, not as an end, but as beginning." He raised his hand, the motion slow, deliberate, and then he snapped his fingers. The sound was soft, barely audible, but its echo rippled across creation. Stars flared and dimmed in unison. Entire sectors vanished in flashes of light, not consumed, but erased, reset to the purity of unformed matter. Planets scarred by millennia of war were reborn, oceans boiling away their corruption, skies clearing of centuries of smoke. The warp remained absent, but something new took its place. A vast neutral field of calm energy, neither life nor death, neither dream nor madness. On Terra, the light was blinding. When it faded, the city was transformed. The cathedrals were gone, replaced by fields of untouched stone and quiet wind. The people who remained stood unharmed, yet changed. They felt no fear, no worship, no despair, only stillness. The hunger of the human soul had been muted, its yearning for gods and glory silenced. Inquisitor Vera stood at the center of the new dawn, tears cutting through the dust on his face. He looked to the throne, now nothing but smooth marble, and whispered, "Was this salvation or extinction?" No answer came. Thanos was gone. Only a faint shimmer lingered in the air where he had stood, a shape of gold and shadow fading into the light. The wind carried his final words, not in sound but in thought, echoing through every mind that still dared to dream. Balance is not peace. It is the breath between creation and oblivion. Guard it well, and then even that faded. The universe exhaled. The warp lay dormant. The gods were gone. And for the first time since the birth of the stars, there was no will left to guide existence, only the quiet, infinite hum of equilibrium. 1,000 years passed, or perhaps only a heartbeat. Time had lost meaning since the silence began. The galaxy, once ablaze with war and divine madness, drifted in quiet orbit through a sky untouched by the screaming of the warp. The void was clean now, cold, immaculate, without song or sorrow. Ships still sailed between the stars, but their journeys were guided by instruments, not by thought. The echoes of faith, of despair, of ambition had faded like dust in sunlight. On Terra, the throne world no longer burned with the fever of worship. The ecclesiarchy's cathedrals had crumbled into marble skeletons, their gold filigree stripped by the wind. The statues of saints and emperors lay half-buried beneath pale soil, and where once the pyres of devotion burned, there were now only quiet gardens, untended but alive. Humanity remained scattered but unbroken. Freed from the weight of gods and monsters, they built anew. Not in the Emperor's name nor in defiance of him, but in the stillness of survival. In the shadow of what had once been the Eternity Gate, a figure stood. He was wrapped in simple robes, his face weathered by age, his eyes reflecting not worship but wonder. He was a chronicler of the Mechanicus, one of the last who still remembered how to remember. His name was Calidus 9, though the number meant little now. He had come to the ruins every year for half a century, recording what the new generations refused to speak of, the day the gods died. Before him rose the remnants of something colossal, half buried in white dust. It was not a building nor a statue, but a shape frozen in eternal repose, a skeleton of impossible scale, fused with veins of gold and crystal. Its form was almost human, yet not. The ribcage glowed faintly, as though embers still smoldered within. The air around it vibrated softly, resonating with a pulse that was neither machine nor life. Calidus 9 adjusted his optical lens, his voice trembling as he dictated into his recorder. The structure remains unchanged. No decay, no flux activity, radiation levels consistent with previous readings. The locals call it the Titan who tried to end God. He paused, glancing upward at the skeletal colossus. But I do not believe it is dead. He climbed closer, each step crunching softly upon crystalline dust. The closer he came, the more the air thickened, heavy with unseen gravity. Symbols shimmered faintly upon the surface of the golden bones, runic sigils no human tongue could name, fragments of thought carved in matter. He reached out a trembling hand to touch them. A whisper bloomed within his mind. It was not sound, it was remembrance. He saw flashes, impossible visions flickering through his consciousness like reflections upon shattered glass. The golden throne collapsing in light, the Emperor and the Titan merging as one. The snap not of destruction but of transformation, a universe remade in silence. And then most hauntingly the voice, calm, measured, eternal. Balance is not peace. He fell to his knees, gasping, tears streaking his face. His recorder slipped from his hands, landing in the dust beside him. The whisper lingered, fading slowly but leaving behind a warmth deep within his chest, as though he had glimpsed something vast and kind. When he opened his eyes again, the faint glow within the skeleton's ribs had strengthened. Only slightly, but enough to make the dust stir around it. He took an involuntary step back. Impossible, he breathed. After a millennium, the light pulsed once, twice. Then it stopped. The air settled. Whatever it had been, it slept again. Yet the impression remained. A heartbeat beneath stone. He bowed his head in reverence, though he did not pray. For he did not pray. Prayer no longer existed. But all remained as it always did in the presence of the unknown. He whispered almost to himself, or perhaps even silenced dreams. Far above him the stars shimmered faintly, and for the first time in an age one of them flickered. It was not the warp rekindling, nor the hand of gods reborn, but something subtler, a tremor in the quiet, like the intake of breath before awakening. Across the galaxy, strange phenomena began to emerge. On the world of Karazaya, a child was born who spoke of colors no one else could see. On Mars, the forges of the Mechanicus reignited of their own accord, machines crafting patterns without command. In the deep void near Cadius Scar, a derelict ship transmitted a signal of perfect mathematical symmetry, an equation repeating endlessly, omega equals 1. The scholars of the New Age debated what it meant. Some said it was random noise, the relic echo of cosmic restructuring. Others whispered that it was a message, balance maintained, the universe remembering its equilibrium. Yet in the quietest corners of human thought, where memory still touched myth, another truth persisted. They spoke in hushed tones of the Titan who had walked beyond divinity, who had silenced the gods not out of malice but necessity. Some worshipped him anew, though no shrine bore his name. Others cursed him, claiming he had stolen purpose itself. But all agreed on one thing. His act had reshaped existence forever, and still upon Terra's silent plain the golden skeleton waited. Beneath the dust, its heart continued to glow faintly, pulsing once every 1,000 years. The rhythm was almost imperceptible, a soft, eternal echo. Those who dared approach claimed to hear it, though none could explain how. A heartbeat, steady, endless. And in that rhythm, the memory of two titans endured, one who had sought to preserve mankind through power, and one who had sought to free it through silence. Both had become one. Both had vanished into myth, but the universe vast and indifferent still turned, and somewhere beyond stars no longer scarred by chaos, a single whisper moved across the void, softer than gravity, lighter than time itself. all things return to balance.